children and between the teachers and the children. And we think about how that teacher is attuned to the needs of children, not just the emotional needs, but the academic and intellectual needs. What are children's interests? Really understanding what are the background knowledge experiences, and how can I regard children and be very child-centered in that approach. And then classroom organization. That really speaks to how we're going to organize the classroom in such a way that maximizes learning. It becomes very productive. We think about that well-oiled machine where procedures and routines are very clear to children, and they're encouraged to have that behavior that will help them to focus on their learning. And we're using those environmental materials that Pam mentioned to really help facilitate and engage children consistently towards their goal-oriented actions. Finally, we get to the instructional support, which really helps us think about thinking. So concept development really helps us understand those thinking processes where we're focused on getting children to analyze, evaluate, create, those higher, we often call those higher order thinking skills, right? But we're also supporting children's acquisition of language. We're building their semantic map. And that's why those real artifacts are so important, because children need to be able to understand the words on the paper. They need to be able to understand what those tools and objects are in the real world to be able to have that mental power that Judy mentioned is being built. So class is really that tool that really helped to isolate at what level do we need to be able to enacting these types of strategies in order to impact children's learning. Some important research was conducted by my good friends and my colleagues, and that was Sue Vartuli and Carol Bowles and Catherine Wilson. And one of the things that was really interesting about their work in the 5-year coaching study that happened in Kansas City was that they were able to determine that it wasn't just about the interactions. It is also about what we're doing. And so when you are developing a highly constructivist environment through the materials and the selection of curriculum topics that are meaningful to children, then you're also paying attention to what's happening in the daily schedule, how you've built that environment, the activities that you plan, the interactions that are specifically on thinking, and how children are engaging and persisting within that framework. And so curriculum fidelity, the level to which a teacher will implement the curriculum as it is intended to be implemented, is equally important. And so this first study of putting these two frameworks together, the framework of the project approach and the framework of the class tool, really became a powerful and dynamic companion of one another. And so what we learned is that when teachers were involved in high levels of project work, the instructional support domain in class, which typically in national norms is the lowest. So typically teachers, we do really good, especially those preschool teachers, we're really warm and caring and friendly. So we do really well in emotional support pretty much. Classroom organization, about the same thing, but it's that instructional support that just consistently has been not as high nationally as we want it to be. And so that's where that first study really helped us understand the importance of project work in terms of the research on interactions. We did a follow-up study. We had a 2-year break in between that 5-year study, and we did a follow-up study. And this time we were looking also at the impact on children's developmental outcomes. We were also looking at the impact on families' perceptions, because we know that within quality, a program of quality, there's lots and lots of elements that help map onto those overall outcomes. And so, just like in the first study, we knew that coaching was a really important tool, because anytime that teachers are taking on the work of projects, they do it better when they're collaborating. They do it better when they can think with someone else, alongside someone else. And so we were examining these different elements. And here's what we learned about teachers' thinking and children's thinking. we observed that the teacher-child interactions that took place within these constructivist environments increased over the project year to the point where we could say there was a statistically significant difference in the increases in those teacher and child outcomes. We also noticed that those meaningful interactions, the teacher's use of those meaningful interactions, and the teacher's use of those constructivist practices, those increased and complemented one another in the same way that the original study had found. We also noticed that children's engagement, so their persistence, their time on a task, their interactions in terms of their own communication with peers and their own communication with teachers, that was increasing to a level that was significant. And then those developmental outcomes, we used the DRDP measure of child developmental outcomes, and what we were able to observe is that as teachers' thinking improved, as teachers' instructional strategies improved, children's developmental levels improved as well.